ain't it just played? Come after me! I'm a man! I'm 40! Can't wait! Let's go!
Good morning and welcome. It is Coffee and Sports. It is the morning show here on Sports Empire Network. Thank you so much for making us part of your morning routine. I am Chris, and of course, that right there, that is Mo. Mo, how are you this morning, sir?
Doing great. You know what? The Baker train is alive and well. I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for Baker Mayfield and company.
Well, we'll talk in a little bit about whether or not you're allowed back on the Baker train after you bowed out last week. We'll have that discussion.
I did.
We'll have that discussion later on. I've been talking to people, Mo. I've been trying to pull some strings and be like, everybody makes mistakes, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I'd like to get back in.
What we didn't get to yesterday, Mo, was the Detroit Lions and the Rams. So it was the Stafford Bowl. It was the Goff revenge game. It was a lot of things rolled into one storyline wise. But when it was all said and done, it was the Detroit Lions winning a playoff game for the first time in 30 plus years. And it was a moment for that franchise that I really think solidifies and encapsulates what Dan Campbell has done for that organization. But let's start here. The first half of that game was absolute fire. Offenses were clicking. It looked like it was going to be a 34-31 type of game. And then the second half comes and we don't get another touchdown. Touchdowns go away in the second half of that game. And it really turned into a grinded out, complete opposite battle of what you saw in the first half, which I think really played into the hands of a Dan Campbell coached football team. I think both teams played well. I think both quarterbacks played extremely well. I would have been personally content with either outcome. I like both teams. I like the quarterback on both teams. I think both teams are a great story. I already feel vindicated for my Rams prediction from the start of the season. So I didn't feel they needed to win to make myself look any better. But Mo, let me ask you this. Moving forward, are the Lions an actual threat in the NFC? Or are you kind of looking at their ceiling being reached? Because it's great to win the playoff game. That's happened. They did that. So now the next logical question, if you're Detroit, is how far can this take us? Where do the wheels come off? Do the wheels come off? And what does that look like?
When you look at a quarterback like Jared Goff, I think he's a very good quarterback, solid. But I think he's also the kind of quarterback who leans on his playmakers to do more after the catch than maybe most. So the ceiling is if Amon-Ra and the other receivers are going to be heavy on the yards after the catch and make plays with their legs, then they could very well go to the conference championship. But I look at them and I look at the matchup versus the Rams and how the game played out. It's going to be a difficult task for them because, to me, that game, Jared Goff probably played as well as he can play. I mean, he was excellent. He probably played as well as he can play. Is he going to be able to duplicate that performance? And is the defense going to be that good? Because the Lions' defense, what impressed me is they struggle at times with their pass rush, but they were getting to Matthew Stafford. Look, and Matthew Stafford is a warrior. I mean, I can't count how many times he got laid out. I mean, he took the kind of blows that a lot of quarterbacks, they might not finish the game. So I'm wondering if that defense is going to be able to get after quarterbacks going forward. I think the competition obviously gets tougher, but if you're a Lions fan, the win alone, like you said, the win alone, the first win in over 30 years, that means so much going forward and what Dan Campbell has done. I think Detroit right now is in a unique situation. Record aside, I think they're playing with house money. They've already done what they needed to do, win a playoff game. Not to mention, if you want to get into the whole beating Matthew Stafford and that kind of thing, they've done that too. Mission accomplished. Anything going forward to me for them is a strawberry or a cherry on top. I think so. I think they go into the next game very confident, but very loose. I don't think they feel any pressure.
Listen, Mo, if you want to put a strawberry on top, I am not going to stop you from doing that. Sunday, you do whatever you feel is best, sir. Looking at the Rams, I'm hard pressed to say that it is anything but a successful season. Do I think the Rams could have beaten the Lions? Absolutely. Do I think the Rams could have made a little run here? Absolutely. But when you're looking at a team, and Sean McVay talked about this during training camp, he talked about how, I'm kind of surprised that everyone's saying we're only going to win 4 games. He's like, I don't really see it. He goes, but if that's what it is, all right, you feel however you got to feel. So McVay knew from the beginning that the general consensus around his team was they weren't going to be very good. And for them to find a way to win double-digit games, for them to find their way into the playoffs, for Matthew Stafford to have the season that he did despite the injuries, for Puka Nacua to emerge out of nowhere as a terrific rookie wide receiver, setting all these records as a rookie wide receiver. You're looking at a shift in narrative from, well, this is probably Matthew's last season with the Rams, to, oh, well, they might be able to build something in the next year or two and maybe go on another run before, Matthew kind of starts to wrap things up. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that shift, because that's kind of where we are now, Mo. If you are a Rams fan, or you are someone who is kind of looking towards the future for the Rams, it's no longer, well, we need to draft a quarterback because we need to move off of Stafford. It's now, well, we might want to draft a quarterback so we have a plan when it comes time. And those are two very different conversations, are they not?
Completely different. And you called it from the beginning, and I witnessed this as the season progressed. Matthew Stafford and the Rams, to me, were the scariest team coming into the playoffs. That passing attack, that receiving core, along with the running game, we don't want to ignore the fact that they have a talented young running back as well. I really think that when you look at the Rams, you have to recalibrate how you think of them going forward. Like you said, the offense is fine. You might want to shore up those tackles, but I think that when you look at the Rams, they're looking to add pieces to the defense to bolster up the defense. The game versus the Lions, like you said, the offenses basically stalled out in the second half, but when they needed to, the Rams defense couldn't get stops when they needed to. And it's not that Detroit scored a ton, but they were able to get sustainable drives that ate up the clock. So I think that's where they're going to look to improve upon going into the next season. But if I've got a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, yeah, I'll draft a quarterback as a succession plan once Matthew Stafford hangs him up, because when he's right, when he's upright, one of the best quarterbacks in football.
No, hands down. Mo, I said, and I'm getting killed, and I think I'm getting killed because people don't listen to what I say. I think they listen to snippets of what I say, and then they run with it. But what I said was, if the Buffalo Bills play in the playoffs like they did against the Dallas Cowboys, they are going to be a very hard team to beat. That is what I opened with. Now, after that, I did say Josh Allen is going to turn the football over. And I made a lot of comments about Josh Allen. But sure, I opened that conversation saying if they play like they did against Dallas, they're going to be hard to beat. Well, against the Steelers, they played like they did it against Dallas, and they looked, for the most part, kind of hard to beat. And Mo, I'm not going to come back from that stance. I truly believe that Buffalo has a recipe for success for this playoff run. It's just a matter of whether or not they are going to be able to stay consistent with doing that. And what that recipe is they need to run the ball first. and they need to limit the moments and opportunities for which Josh Allen is doing things in the air. Because the more he starts to throw the football, the more you're going to open the door for the possibility of turnovers. And I feel pretty comfortable saying that when he ended the season turning the ball over in 7 or 8 games straight. So don't sit here and tell me, if you are a Buffalo Bills fan, no. Like, he's not fine. He turns the ball over a lot, to the point where he's basically been doing it every single game for half the season. But if they can run the ball and Josh can take the check down stuff, and he only takes 3 or 4 shots a game, and he uses his legs in certain moments, they don't lean on him to be the runner, you're going to see what you saw against Pittsburgh yesterday, Mo. But again, the theme of our show yesterday was not getting caught up in the narrative of the first playoff game, right?
Correct.
And that's what I need Buffalo Bills fans to also do. Because yesterday you beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are a football team that, Mo, 6 weeks ago, we didn't think they were going to make the playoffs. 4 weeks before that, we didn't know how they had the record they had, because we didn't think they were all that good.
Agreed.
They're on their third quarterback. They were without their best defensive player. Oh, by the way, they're 1-10. Now they're 1-11 when TJ Watt doesn't play. I'm sure there are other things to look into besides TJ Watt wasn't in that game, but I don't know what those other things are at the moment. So let's just go with the fact that they are 1-11 when TJ Watt doesn't play. I take nothing away from the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they were never in the same stratosphere as the Buffalo Bills were. And for the most part, that was fairly evident in the game yesterday. Now, Buffalo allowed them to get back into the game unexcusably. You go up 21-0 after a Superman Josh Allen play, and this looks like we're well on our way to a 48-7 victory. And then next thing you know, it's 24-17 or 21-17 or some nonsense. And I'm sitting here like, why is Pittsburgh still in this game? What happened here where Pittsburgh suddenly learned how to play football and the Buffalo Bills offense suddenly just stopped learning how to play football? But it is what it is. They won. In the end, they won by 2 scores, Mo. Buffalo looks good. But again, my message moving forward to Buffalo Bills fans is, let's not act like you went in there and you beat the Ravens by 2 scores. You went in there and you beat a team with their third-string quarterback, with a defense that I think was a little bit of smoke and mirrors for the majority of the season, and they gave you their best effort, but they're not in the same realm that you are in, that you're supposed to be in when you're clicking on all cylinders.
No question, the Buffalo Bills walked into that game the better team, the more talented team, and like you said, not just minus their best defensive player, their best player. TJ Watt is their best football player, period. He impacts the game that way. So it actually did matter. To their credit, typical Mike Tomlin team, they fought back. They were gritty. They found their way into the game. But I never felt like, even when they came back, that they were going to be a threat to win. I thought Buffalo would do just enough, and Pittsburgh's offense has a ceiling. We know that. And Buffalo did just enough. And they did the formula that we talked about before. They predominantly ran the football. Josh Allen threw for just over 200 yards. It wasn't like he was an overpowering passing attack. They ran the ball. It was ground and pound. And when you ground and pound, you minimize the opportunity for mistakes or turnovers. So I give Buffalo credit again. Like you said, on the morning show, we don't criticize or take away from wins. They got the win. They advance. Their true test will come in their next matchup.
Correct. And Mo, the thing that frustrates me, maybe I don't like Tony Romo. I think as I get a little older, I think I need to accept that I don't like Tony Romo. But aside from not liking Tony Romo, who, by the way, and I saw an amazing tweet yesterday, and the tweet was something to the effect of, if your man talks to you or about you the way Tony Romo talks about Josh Allen, marry him right away, no questions asked. And Tony Romo loves Josh Allen. to the point where anytime Josh Allen does anything that results in positive net yards, he is literally salivating over Josh Allen. And I'm listening to that game last night, and they're talking about how Buffalo finally found a running game, and now Buffalo has this running attack. And Mo, I looked it up because I knew I was right, but I thought, well, maybe I'm not. But I looked it up. Buffalo had a good running game last season. They just didn't run the damn football last year. They had two backs that averaged over 4 yards a carry last year. Now, did they get a ton of carries? No. Why not? Because Josh Allen ran the football last year. And the year before that, they had a back that averaged almost 4.5 yards a carry. Did he get a ton of carries? No. Why not? Because Josh Allen ran the football that year too. So don't act like Buffalo has never been able to run the football, because the last 2 seasons, they've had backs that have averaged a good chunk of yards in a small number of carries. And I'm talking, low hundreds, right? I'm not talking,
Right.
200-300 carries. I'm talking like 101 carries for the year, 106 carries for the year. Not a lot if you're talking about your lead back throughout the entire season. But to pretend that Buffalo's had zero production from their running backs the past couple of years during the Super Bowl window, and now all of a sudden they've found this running game. No, Mo. I mean, the honest take is they've said, hey, let's stop running Josh Allen so much, and let's actually run the guys that we pay to run, and let our offensive line actually run block, because they're actually kind of decent at it. And that's what they're doing. And credit to the offensive coordinator for allowing that to happen, because that's really been the issue the past couple of seasons in Buffalo, is they've just chosen to let Josh Allen be a one-man show, and now they're pulling Josh Allen back a little bit, and you're seeing the result. But Mo, let's jump to the other side of the field. Maybe you have no issue with this. I personally had an issue with it. I did not like Mike Tomlin walking out of his post-game press conference. In case you didn't see it, Tomlin went to the podium. He was clearly already annoyed. I think he knew the line of questioning that was going to be coming his direction. And a young woman, I don't know if she was a young woman or not, but a woman asked him, she opened her question with, you have 1 year left on your contract. I think we know the direction that question was going to go in. She didn't get to finish her question because Tomlin left the podium and left, and he was over it. Mo, when you are an NFL coach, you want to be out there after the big playoff wins talking. You got to be out there after the playoff losses talking as well. And again, we talked about this before. When you win a playoff game, the previous 18 weeks mostly go away. When you lose a playoff game, the previous 18 weeks become more magnified. And what happened during those previous 18 weeks in Pittsburgh? Well, there was a little mini quarterback crisis with Kenny Pickett, and whether or not he actually wanted to play quarterback, we don't know. But Mike Tomlin does, but we don't know. There was infighting with your wide receivers. There was questions of effort across the board on both sides of your ball by current players and former players within your organization. And there's been these swirling comments about whether or not, A, Mike Tomlin has lost the locker room, B, Mike Tomlin is on the hot seat, or C, Mike Tomlin no longer wants to be the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers because he's just been there so goddamn long, and he's going to start looking for a new environment after this season. When you lose, all those questions are going to come to the forefront. So for me, Mo, him just walking away because he didn't feel like answering those questions, I had an issue with that. Stand up there, give me the generic answers, and move on, because doesn't that kind of come with the territory? I mean, I would understand maybe if he addressed it already, and this was like the 4th or 5th time they tried to go back to it, but I don't know. I thought it was kind of lowbrow in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being too sensitive on a Tuesday morning. But for me, it's part of your job. Stand up there, answer the damn questions, and then move on.
And I think normally Mike Tomlin would do just that. I think there is a lot of things going on within that organization, within that locker room, and it's raw. And I thought that he could have stepped up to the podium, even gave the Belichick like mumble, mumble, mumble 4 or 5 words and left. So I'm with you on that. But I do understand this, and I want to remind people: look at that roster, top to bottom. They shouldn't have been in the playoffs.
It's not great.
They shouldn't have been in the playoffs. It's not great. They have good running backs. I wouldn't say great running backs. They have a okay offensive line, and if you've got 3 quarterbacks, like they say, you don't have no quarterback. They don't have a quarterback. They have a bunch of dudes that they've interacted and shifted in and out the roster. Like, so when I look at it, I for them to end up where they ended up, I'm impressed. Even with all the things that are said for lack of effort and arguments and infighting, which is all true. We witnessed a lot of this. I would say that it's probably been his most difficult coaching job, and yet they're playing football in the postseason. Not anymore, but I think that he actually did an excellent job when you think about all the turmoil that was going on in that locker room. I don't agree with his approach to this walking it off, not dealing with the questions. And maybe he was just anticipating more questions about him than the team.
He definitely was.
And maybe if he didn't want to answer questions about his future or just talk about football, because I know Tomlin's the kind of guy, does anybody have any questions about football? He'll talk. But I think he thought it was going to be about him, and so he bounced. And I'm not excusing that, but I think that's where his head was at.
Well, let's bring JG onto the show this morning. 2 days in a row, JG. Can't go wrong with that. We got some baseball stuff to talk about. I think we're going to talk a little bit of football with JG too. Let's welcome JG to the show. JG, how are you this morning, sir?
Good morning, guys. How you doing?
Doing well.
JG, I'll be honest with you, not much has happened since we last talked to you about baseball. And when I say not much, I mean literally nothing. All the people we talked about yesterday about where are they going to end up, what's it look like, zero movement on that front. No new rumors on that front. So with that in mind, let's talk about this. The Atlanta Braves gave $5 million to their number 3 international shortstop prospect. Then the Giants, who, international people want their money, apparently. I believe they gave $4 million to their number 4 rated international prospect. This is coming on the heels of us seeing some guys at the end of this regular season in baseball who have never played in Major League Baseball before get themselves some pretty big contracts moving forward as they get ready to come up to Major League Baseball this upcoming season. JG, what is this shift that we're seeing when it comes to giving money to prospects who have never actually played Major League Baseball before? And if you just look at the history of Major League Baseball, there's a lot of names that have out there that have gotten some shine, and then they've gotten to the big dance, and they're not that good. And that happens a lot, and we talk about it more in football. But if you look at the number of times that happens in baseball, I would say it happens more in baseball, because all the time in baseball, you got people shuffling up and down from the major to the minors, and they might come up for a little stretch, and who knows, that might be it for them. And they came up and, they gave up 8 runs in 6 innings, and we don't see them again. And then next time you hear about them, they're like, well, they came up last year and they got shelled. So, and now that's them. That's what they've done in Major League Baseball. And for some guys, that's it. And now you're looking at guys who have never played with the big boys, and they're getting millions already thrown their way. Is just how the economics of baseball are heading. And this is what we're going to see moving forward.
Well, so for international signings, and that's what this is the international free agency. This has been a practice for a very long time, because of the rules of these of the international signing is a whole lot different than what it is for American kids. Obviously, American kids at 16, 17 years old, they're in high school, so they're amateurs at that point. And then they either go to the draft and get drafted out of high school at 18, 19 years old, or they go to college and they're still amateurs for another 2 to 3 years at that point. International signings, it's very different process. They can sign them right out the gate at 16 years old, 17 years old. Jose Perdomo for the Atlanta Braves, who was signed the $5 million bonus, he's 17 years old. And that's why they are investing more money in international signings, is because you're able to get them at such a young age. That you have this kid from 17 years old, he starts in the minor leagues. By the time he's by year 3 is kind of what they project these kids by year 3. Well, he's 20 years old and he's going to be in the big leagues potentially at that point. Where so you're starting the clock at 20 years old versus a kid who's in college, and especially in today's era of college, where COVID year, waiver of eligibility continues. You have a kid who's 23, 24 years old in college. So the investment, long-term investment is greater for these international kids that because you're signing them so young compared to an American kid who's going to be in college for 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even sometimes 6 years. So that's why these teams, like I said, it's been a practice for a very long time where they're investing $2, $3, $4 million in these kids. And especially if they project them to be, future all-stars, you're going to see like a team like the Atlanta Braves offer, $5 million, because that's the projection of the kid, especially as a shortstop, which is what Perdomo is. You're looking at it saying we have time to develop you for these next 3, 4 years. By the time you're 21, we project you to be in that starting shortstop position in Atlanta for us. So it's not a new practice in the international signing game. It's been going around for many years in this case. Is it a gamble? Absolutely, it's a gamble. So is drafting a high school kid. So is drafting a college kid, because you don't know what the projection is going to be in the next 2 to 3 years. But because you get them at such a young age, at 16, 17 years old, the risk in their eyes is less, because they're going to be in the system for a minimum of 3 years at that point, and they can develop them the way they want to and prepare them the way they want to. So when they get to that point of being ready as a big leaguer, they have that chance to do so.
So JG, walk us through the American side of it. So if you are a 16 or a 17-year-old on the international side, you get to be signed as a free agent. You potentially get a $1 million deal. You come over and you're with the team as a 16 or 17-year-old, and that's where your big league career starts. On the American side of it, you're a 16 or a 17-year-old. What happens? You can be drafted or selected by a team at that age, but it seems like most American kids choose to go to college at that point. Is this a situation where on the American side, they're just not being offered that money, and that's why college seems like such a beneficial thing for them to do? Or what I literally have no idea. What does it look like on the American side?
So unless you're Bryce Harper, in which case you drop out of high school at 15 years old, you get your GED and you go to college, and then you can be your junior college at 16, 17 years old, and you get drafted at that point. That was the exception to the rule, was what Bryce and his family did. The difference in the international side compared to the American side is in the international side that these kids are training every day for hours to be professional baseball players. We don't have that luxury as Americans, because we do have school. We are telling these kids, you have to get the education. You have to be in school from 7 a.m. to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You get the 2-hour practice with your high school team. You get a lesson for an hour. So at most, we're telling American kids, you're going to practice 3 hours, once a week for 3 hours. The rest of the week, you're going to practice 2 times with your higь school team, or you're going to practice for 2 hours with your high school team. You may get if you play travel ball, you'll practice maybe 2 times a week with your travel team. So the practice time for American kids is significantly reduced compared to international kid, where they are up. They may have school. We're talking about these, in certain parts of the world that the schooling is not ideal, where we privileged Americans, we have the ideal school. Even in some of these states that aren't great, it's still better than some of the countries that are out there around the world. So they're looking for ways to be able to get out of it, which is what they're doing to play professional sports. So these kids are training from 8 in the morning. They're taking ground balls and taking and batting practice and and doing training if they can from 8 in the morning till probably 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. They're going hours and hours. So the skill set of is being more defined at the international level at a young age, because that is all they're doing. Whereas we're telling kids, no, you can't just be a professional baseball player. You have to have other resources to be greater than that. So that's the difference in the international and the American side, is that they're putting a whole lot more time because they have the time to do so compared to us as Americans in that process. And the rules are different, where you're considered an amateur. International, they're considered an amateur able to sign just because that's their resource. That is the rules and regulation of what they're allowing these kids to be able to be. And it's opening the avenue for those kids at that age, at that point in their lives in those countries. So there's a difference in that side of the thought process, but because of the time that's being spent compared to us as Americans, it's why they're able to get a little bit more out of the signing period. And again, you go to college now, especially with NIL. These kids can say, okay, well, I can go make some money in college and spend 2, 3, 4 years, learning, that level and playing at a high level of college baseball and be able to develop my skills that way too.
And JG, that was the next question I was going to ask you. Obviously, NIL plays a role whenever you're talking about a college athlete, but usually we have the NIL conversation in football. And for a lot of schools, football pays the light bill. For a lot of the other, athletic programs that these schools have, I think that's a fair assessment. When you're looking at a non-football program, what does NIL money look like in those situations? Because I don't know if this has ever really been a big conversation outside of football. We know money exists for other sports. It's not like, if you go to like LSU, for example, it's not like the football players are, on seventh heaven and then everyone else is on the poor street, and there's across the board they're all doing pretty great at LSU athletics. But it's also fair to say that football is bringing in the money for the rest. Maybe not. I mean, your basketball program there for the women is bringing some money too, let me just say. But you know what I'm saying. So what does NIL look like for non-football programs at these big D1 schools?
Well, considering LSU, the top 2 athletes for earnings wise, NIL wise, is Olivia Dunn, gymnast, and Angel Reese, women's basketball. So that's
it was a terrible example because of LSU basketball.
But to answer the question, and it's a good question to ask, and educating a lot of the athletes that I've come across, from coaching travel ball and who are in high school and now in college, and trying to educate these kids. For college baseball wise, again, you have boosters at every program for every sport that is putting money together. LSU, for an example, has a booster who's an attorney in Baton Rouge. He is able to help out not just the football program for NIL, but he does do a lot with the basketball and football side and baseball side as well. And if you have the outlier, the exception to the rule, like Olivia Dunn, who's able to go get her own NIL money, which is for gymnastics wise, it's endorsements and sponsorships. You're absolutely able to get a lot of the revenue side of that from that ways. And then you have the booster people like like LSU has, or like A&M has, or Texas, or Oklahoma, Florida. You're able to go and get these people who are just going to say, hey, I'll write you a check for X amount of money at that point. But the NIL for different sports, like I said, for baseball wise, it's a little bit different. Because there's not, like I said, the boosters are there, but it's not as big of a check that these guys are writing compared to what they are getting in the football side of things. You have to do a little bit more. You have to go on a little bit more. You have to do your own research to be able to get it more. So again, using LSU's example, a lot of the baseball players actually have Raising Cane's as a NIL deal. compared to it. So they're able to do a little bit more with Raising Cane's. They're able to do a little bit more with some of the local, a little bit more of the local side of things. And that's the key. If you're in a town like Baton Rouge, you have a little bit more resources locally that can help out with NIL versus a smaller town that may not have the same resources of NIL side of things for that. So it's about doing a lot of these programs have guys and have people, not just guys, have people in the program that are able to research for the athletes, and then the athletes are the ones that have to make the phone calls. So schools cannot make phone calls for NIL. That is a violation. So we're talking about why is there violations in NIL, or why at this point it's the wild west of athletes making money, but you still have to have certain rules and regulations to make sure that people are just not. The schools themselves are not the ones finding the money, and I know, believe me, we're not naive. Schools will still do it, but that's where we say, there's an NIL violation. Yes, because the schools themselves cannot make phone calls for NIL. That is the player and the booster, or the player and the company that they're doing NIL with. That's the ones who has to make the phone calls to be able to do so. So there's different avenues that these players have to go about. But for other sports, again, being in a bigger city, bigger college town, it's a little bit easier to find versus a smaller, college town that may not have the same resources.
Got it. So the school talks to the booster. I see the path we're taking here, JG. All right, gentlemen, let's pivot a little bit. Let's do a little bit of NFL stuff before we get JG out of here. Mo, the Atlanta Falcons apparently have interest in head coach Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick apparently has interest in the Atlanta Falcons. It is mutual interest, Mo. I read that story last night, and I said to myself, why in the hell would Bill Belichick go to the Atlanta Falcons? Because, Mo, I look at the Falcons, and I see nothing that I think Bill Belichick would want to deal with. They don't have a quarterback right now. They don't have a good defense. They don't even have a below average defense. I don't like their defense at all. And yeah, they have nice pieces on the offensive side in Robinson, and they have a nice tight end over there. They have London, who's a nice receiver. But Mo, I look at the Falcons and I say to myself, you have a worse defense than he's leaving in New England. You have better pieces on offense, but you don't have a quarterback. Is this, Mo, just kind of a courtesy interview by Bill to kind of get the gears going that he's wanted, and he's not really considering Atlanta? Do you think he's really considering Atlanta, Mo?
I do. I think he's really considering Atlanta because I think he's of the belief that they can go out and get a quarterback. Okay. They can go out and why not look to try to sign a guy like Kirk Cousins? Mm-hmm. Kirk Cousins wouldn't be a huge upgrade. He wouldn't if you get a Kirk Cousins, guess what? You'll hear Kyle Pitts' name called every week. Yep. Guarantee it. So I think that Belichick is serious about Atlanta. I'm sure he hasn't made a full commitment, but I think he's thinking maybe I won't have the GM power, but I can go in there with the knowledge that they're going to go out and get the pieces that I need. And you need a quarterback. I think he also feels like it's not one of those things that as soon as Bill Belichick gets here, we expect to go 11-5. So I think there's going to be a time. Maybe there's a timeline. So an improvement for Atlanta would just be heavy winning record. Start there, right? That would be an improvement. It is a young team as well. So I think that Bill Belichick thinks I can build up that defense. There is some talent there, but I can build up that defense. And look at the division that is in. Bill Belichick, he's got a history of being in weak divisions for over 20 years. So he's going to another division that's very weak. I think that's smart on his part.
JG, you like that potential matchup so far? I know it's still early in the process, but they're mutually interested in each other.
Yeah, they're mutually interested, and I don't see the fit for Belichick in Atlanta. Again, if this stage of Belichick's career, does he want to have to? And again, we're not saying this is a full rebuild, but because especially that the division is still so bad, and I don't see the division getting any better in 2024. you're still having to make some moves to turn this around, which in the NFL, of all sports, the NFL is probably the easiest to turn a team around if you have the resources to do so. And I think the Falcons have some good resources. They have, as I said, they're a young team, and they have some young pieces to build around. But the quarterback position is still a big question mark. And Kirk Cousins was mentioned, but you only have $20 million in salary cap coming in, which for Kirk Cousins, that's not going to be enough. You have to make some other moves to try to get a little bit more relief to be able to make a move like Kirk Cousins. And I don't think that the Falcons have the ability to cut that much of their salary cap to be able to acquire a Kirk Cousins. Now, other quarterbacks potentially, yes. But if you're Belichick, do you want to take that risk at getting the wrong quarterback at this stage of your career and having to go through more times kind of what you dealt with in New England at this point? I don't think so. I think there's another team that's probably out there that's better for Belichick, that's more ready to win now. And that's what at this point, this will be his last coaching stop. And we're talking maybe 3 years, 3 to 5 years max. We're probably saying for Belichick as a coach. I don't think Atlanta's the right fit to do so. Just because there's still so much building that needs to be done on that team. Now, again, as I said, the division's bad. Maybe they can get a average quarterback and still be able to turn around with good coaching and good decision making, which is what hurt the Falcons more so this year with Arthur Smith. That cost them at times. So that probably is you can add 2 to 3 wins of good coaching with Belichick, and that turns it around from there. But I just think there's too many things that need to be done for Atlanta for Belichick to be satisfied of taking that job.
Let me just add this. Let me just add this though. I don't think his market is that big. I don't think his market's not that big. Like San Diego already has a quarterback in place. They don't want him. He's not going there. So I because they know what his history with offense or his lack of knowledge of offense, I don't think they want him. I think his market's not big enough to where he has like 5 choices. I think Atlanta's probably 1 or 2 choices. So I think that it might not be ideal for him, but if he wants to be a head coach, it's probably one of the places that he's really seriously thinking about taking that job. And no, you might not get a Kirk Cousins. Maybe you go out and get a Russell Wilson. I guess my point is, if you're Bill Belichick and you're trying to continue your coaching career, you might have to get a bridge quarterback before you get a franchise quarterback. But I also think he has to be realistic about his job options. People do look at him and go, he's kind of old school. He's a defensive-minded coach in an NFL in an era where offensive-minded coaches are kings. And more importantly, he's also not a young man. So it's not like he's going to lead your franchise for the next 6 to 8 years. His window as well, as far as him coaching, is probably very short. So I think the turnaround has to be quicker. I think Atlanta's a realistic choice because he doesn't have a lot of options.
I think at this point, and I'll throw this out there, could there be a situation that Bill Belichick doesn't coach in 2024? Because like I said, I agree with the options they're not great. There's not many. Again, unless especially if Dallas does not let Mike McCarthy go, which is an option of Belichick. So there's been rumors and talks about Belichick going to Dallas. But if McCarthy stays in Dallas, Atlanta goes in a different direction. Can we really see Bill Belichick not coaching in 2024? And I think that's probably likely, where he takes a year off at that point and try to go back into the next cycle. Which, if that's the case, he's potentially the top target in 2025. But I think that's more of a likely scenario where he doesn't coach in 2024, more than just taking any job just to have a job. And I think if he goes to Atlanta, I think that's what it is. He takes a job just to have a job, and that would be a step down in the legacy, I think, of Belichick currently, just because if you're the supposed greatest coach of all time, that's it. That you don't want just a job. You need the job to be a Super Bowl contender at this stage of your career, which is what you're wanting to be every year until you decide to retire.
JG, always a pleasure to have you on here in the morning, sir, and we will see you later on in the week.
Sounds good, guys. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
And Mo, isn't that really the question with Bill Belichick? I mean, obviously he's chasing Shula. He's coming up on that record. He could have I don't know how many. He's not that many behind him. I think he could accomplish it with a really good season next year, or he's most likely going to accomplish it with 2 seasons
At
wherever
least.
he goes next.
Sure.
So obviously that's, kind of the next accolade for him. And then maybe he would never say this out loud. Maybe he would only say this, in his deepest thoughts by himself in a dark room. He does kind of need to find success without Brady, doesn't he? On some level, winning seasons at least, something, right?
I believe that matters more to him than Don Shula's record. If the Don Shula's record thing is great, but ultimately he wants to win another Super Bowl to prove that he can have that kind of success minus Tom Brady. Because I think if he can accomplish that, he feels vindicated in the fact that it wasn't just all Tom. It was a collaboration. It was me and Tom. And I think that's his true motivation, that Tom left. He went out and got one more Super Bowl without me. And I had one good season, but I've had nothing but bad seasons since. I think he's desperate, maybe motivated more than anything, to prove I am a great football coach. I can lead a team to a Super Bowl minus a Tom Brady. So, look, I think Dallas is the most obvious choice. In a perfect world. Him and his agent, I'm sure they're going like, yes, that'll be the spot should they move out Mike McCarthy. But look, in light of recent things that just happened, I mean, really recent, who's to say that he couldn't end up in Philadelphia or somewhere like that?
And that is where we are going next, Mo. It's like you read my mind. The Eagles played well. The Eagles had a football game last night, and they were on the field. Plays were called, and they got perp walked by the Baker train.
They did.
I, who did not step off the Baker train, didn't think it was going to look that way. I thought it was going to be a close game that the Bucs pulled out in the end. I did not think it was going to be a beatdown like it was. I don't know where that Tampa Bay defense came from last night. The Eagles couldn't do anything, Mo. They could not run the football. The Philly defense couldn't tackle, period. The Tampa Bay defense tackled everything in front of them. There were so many plays where they tried to get Philly players in space, and they got them the ball in space, and first tackle hit them every time. And if the first tackle didn't bring them down, it slowed them down and allowed the rest of the defense to rally to bring them down for a loss.
So impressed with the speed of that defense.
It was the swarming defense for the Buccaneers all night. And I understand you're different without your best playmaker. And I know this personally. I've seen the Dolphins play without Tyreek. It looks different. And I know, and as a Dolphin fan, I hear this, well, you still got Waddle. Yeah, okay. But Waddle's not Tyreek. Just like Smith is not A.J. Brown. Smith is great when A.J. Brown's on the field. He looks like a 1. He looks like a legitimate top-tier wide receiver, elite-level wide receiver. A lot of that has to do with who's on the other side of the field because he gets better opportunities. Waddle is a great wide receiver. He looks at times like he could be an elite wide receiver when Tyreek is on the field. Take away A.J. Brown, take away Tyreek Hill, Waddle and Smith are still good receivers.
No question.
But they don't look quite as elite when they're out there being the only option. And Smith still played a great game last night. He did fed the football, but he was fed the football because there wasn't really anywhere else to go with the football, Mo. There wasn't much else happening on the offensive side if it wasn't going to Devonta Smith.
And then Tampa took that away.
Correct.
Look, I'm so impressed. So it's not a secret. Anybody that knows football knows one thing, that Todd Bowles, the head coach of the Bucs, has been one of the top defensive coordinators for years.
Hands down.
It's no question that Todd Bowles teams, as a rule, they like to blitz.
Yep.
They like to come for you. They'll come zone blitz. They'll rush, and they rush 5 routine. They made a 5-man rush routine. And what bothered me, and mind you, I picked the Eagles. I was off the Baker train, admittedly. I thought the Eagles would win a close game. But when you go zero blitz, when you go zero over and over and over, number one thing the offense is supposed to attack, because it's right there, is the middle of the field. There's nobody there.
And it was right there, Mo. It was there the entire game.
And they never hit on it. Not
Nope.
once. And it just drove me crazy. And look, to his credit, Jalen Hurts took a beating. He did.
He did.
He took a beat. He stood strong. He got hit several times. And I think he got to the point where he got impatient and he started holding the ball too long, which complicated made their offense stall out even more. And once they took away Devontae Smith, there wasn't another option. There was nowhere else to go. The Bucs, they were led by the old man, Levante David, 12-year veteran. He looked like a second-year rookie with all the speed he was running. I mean, that
his
defense was
side speed, Mo. He looked like a 24-year-old kid out there. The way he was moving side to side,
he did. He did not look like a 12-year veteran. Like, he was the fastest player on the field, side to side, making plays, disrupting plays, like. And watching Todd Bowles just go relentlessly, like, we're not even hiding it. We're lining up 5 guys. They weren't even hiding it. Like, you know how you go pre-snap, like, I know what's coming. They wanted you to know what's coming. And it didn't matter because they knew that outside of Devontae Smith, nobody else on the Eagles could win one-on-one. They knew they couldn't. And once they took him away with safety help over the top, game over.
And Mo, let's not overlook the fact that in the first half of that game, Tampa Bay dropped 5 or 6 balls.
Oh my God, that was driving me crazy. And I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, you know how bad a game this would have been, how big a blowout this would have been. And we're talking about Mike Evans and got those guys missing. And I'm like, my God, if they had made some of those catches, this would have been a route to the next level.
And Mike Evans and Godwin got involved a little more late in the game. But for the majority of the game, the balls weren't going to them.
No,
it was going to the tight end, and it was going to receivers 3, and the 4th receiver, who was a rookie, had a big play. Those were the playmakers for the Buccaneers last night. It wasn't 1 and 2. It wasn't Evans and Godwin. So you push the Baker train forward, and you say to yourself, man, if that defense shows up next week against a quarterback who isn't as mobile as Jalen Hurts is, against a quarterback that doesn't necessarily have the same athletic, God-given gifts that Jalen Hurts has for just keeping plays alive and extending things another second or two.
Right.
And they can get their actual number 1 and number 2 playmakers involved in the game for the entire game. Mo, this is looking like a dangerous team. Now, obviously, like I said, we're not going to fall too much into the narrative, right? Because it was just 2 weeks ago we saw this entire team not score a touchdown against the damn Carolina Panthers in a game they needed to win. They needed to win that game, and they couldn't score a touchdown against the Panthers. So this is very much a Jekyll and Hyde Tampa Bay Buccaneers team.
It can be.
But the Hyde side of it is nice.
They're scary.
If it's Hyde next week against the Lions, we're talking about the Baker train in the NFC Championship game.
That's insane. That's insane. I want to say one more thing. When we watched the games last night, maybe the theme coming into today should have been fundamentals, because the tackling was horrendous in both football games. The Eagles, the tackling or lack of tackling from their it drove me crazy. I mean, there were so many missed and broken tackles. And the same applied as well if you watch the Bills and the Steelers game. Steelers guys were grabbing guys and trying to sling them instead of tackling them. That's fundamental, tackle or catch the football. I mean, that should have been the theme, fundamentals. I'm looking at the Eagles unravel live during the course of the football game, and you're seeing guys yell at each other in the sidelines. And it was interesting because the Eagles sideline and the guys up in the skybox, they looked a lot like the Dallas sideline and Jerry Jones up in the sky. The same emotions, the same anger. And so in the post game, when you hear people say like, well, they might want to move on from Nick Sirianni, initially that sounds crazy, but I'm not so sure. you lose what, 6 out of your last 7 games.
Yep.
And then you get perp walked in the playoffs, and I know it's on the road, but talent for talent to an inferior team, and that where does that start at? That has we're not going to blame Howie Roseman, right? Best GM in football, so he's gotten you talent. So you're looking at your coaching staff and your head coach and your offensive coordinator, and I don't know. I'm watching them call plays sometimes, and I remember yesterday you saying, "What are we doing? What did you see?" They're going 0 blitz, so you're not doing cut routes or slants. You're doing out routes. What the hell are you doing? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Are they going to fire Nick Sirianni? Because think about this. Before you answer, think about this. Because it's 2 different situations. In Dallas, the situation is we expect a Super Bowl. You go 12-5, 3 straight seasons. You don't even get us to the NFC Championship game. In Dallas, I think it's 100% about how far as you get in the playoffs. And Mike McCarthy has had 3 years of 12-5 and 3 years of not getting to the NFC Championship game. I think it's going to be that cut and dry in Dallas. I think Jerry Jones is going to look at it and say, this really was, I know I say it every year, right, but this was the year. And of all the years where we couldn't lose in the first round, to that team, this was the year. And I think it's that simple. In Philly, I don't think it's that simple. In Philly, if they went 13-4, they didn't collapse down the stretch. They lost a couple of games here and there. If they go 13-4, and let's say they still don't get the 1 seed. Let's say they tie San Francisco, who also goes 13-4, and they still have to play in the opening round of the playoffs, and they lose to Tampa Bay. And it's a terrible loss. It's just 1 game. And I think Sirianni survives that. And they just say, damn, Tampa Bay overwhelmed us. That defense came out of nowhere. We just couldn't get it going offensively. A.J. Brown was injured. And I think he's fine, Mo. But when you look at the collapse and all the noise and all the extracurriculars, I don't know.
I think you brought up a great point. And remember, Sirianni was just in the Super Bowl, correct? So he was in the Super Bowl. This is kind of a letdown season. And look, there were some injuries that played a role, especially without A.J. Brown going into this postseason. And Sirianni has done what Mike McCarthy couldn't do. He was coming off a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy, you go 12-5 multiple times. That tells me, A, your team is loaded with talent, but B, there's a ceiling to how far you can take us as a head coach. There's clearly a ceiling, and there's a body of work to show that there's a ceiling. So I think you're right. I think at worst case scenario, I think Sirianni gets another season, right? Let's say that this just finished. This didn't go well, but I think he comes back under the guise of, we need to see you look like you did the year before and take us like that, take us to that level again. And then we'll assess where you're at going forward. I think with Mike McCarthy, Jerry Jones is sitting there like, I can't take it. This was the year. We had home field advantage, Mike. What are you doing? I think changes are coming in Dallas.
Just to wrap a couple things up real quick, Mo. The Eagles, after the Eagles beat the Chiefs, and Nick Sirianni made a fool out of himself, yelling at Chiefs fans, going into the tunnel and all this nonsense. He goes 2-6 after that, including their blowout loss to the Buccaneers. So interesting there. And then coming down this morning while we were on the air, Jason Kelce announces his retirement from the NFL.
Great career.
Probably the greatest center in NFL history is going to hang it up, which is interesting because is that a sign of things to come? Are things shifting in Philly? Is it he's done? Right. So interesting that he's the first domino to fall before anything else becomes kind of official. But that's it for a Tuesday here on Coffee and Sports. Close us out, Mo.
Hey, thank you for everybody in the chat. We always appreciate your support. Thanks for everybody that's watching us live, everybody that will watch us later on. Check out all the great shows and content we have for you on Sports Empire Network. Check out the Empire.
Make sure you're back here, same time, same place tomorrow morning. The NFL genius himself, Gene from Wire to Wire, will be here. We will start breaking down the divisional round of the playoffs as we put an end to the Super Wildcard weekend. And that's all happening right here tomorrow morning here on Coffee and Sports. It's the morning show, and we will see you in the morning.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready.
I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face. Oh, I'm from Brooklyn. Hey, guys, any